All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Proposers Conference for the Strong Nurturing Families and Safe, Stable Communities Priority Areas for the RFP. Just a quick reminder that applicants, the deadline to apply is May 1st, 2026 at 5 p.m. And recommendations for funding are for programs that are effective October 2026 through September 2027. This is being recorded, so this will be available on our website after today. I just want to take a minute to do some quick introductions. Today's panelists, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura Hasse. I'm the Executive Director. Also on the call today, we have Zach Hackley, Director of Finance, Kara Good, Director of Program Operations, Chanda Narkowitz, Manager of Planning, Evaluation, and Community Development, Nicole King, Program Manager, Jennifer Carter, Finance Manager, and Brandon Febrez. He's not on camera today, but he will be off camera answering questions via the Q&A. And then other team members for CSC, not on today's call, Christine Georges, our Administrative Services Manager, Stephanie Macera, Executive Assistant for Program Support, and Edie Magoya, Program Support Specialist. Just a quick rundown of the timeline. The RFP was released this past Thursday on March 26th. Obviously, today is the Virtual Proposers Conference, March 30th. The deadline to submit online questions, and we'll walk you through that later on how to do that. But if you have any questions as you're working on your application, the deadline to submit those questions is by 5 p.m. on Thursday, April 30th. The online application is due on Friday, May 1st by 5 p.m. And once that deadline passes, you will not be able to submit any additional supporting documents or information. So please make sure that you submit everything within your application that's asked of you, because we will not accept anything after that. If needed, we will meet with applicants throughout the summer, typically in June, July, and early August. We don't always need to meet with applicants, so just bear that in mind, but we may request a meeting with you throughout the summer. And then funding decisions will be made at our regular council meeting, which is August 24th. Those council meetings are now held at 5:30 in the evenings. So put that on your calendar. So that, again, that would be when any funding decisions or recommendations are made to council. And then the funding year begins October 1st. Okay, who can apply for funding? CSC Policy 1.1 eligibility criteria is outlined in page 2 of the RFP. That document you'll see later on today, but also it will be available as a resource. And it's also detailed in our program and funding policies. But essentially, CSC funds nonprofit organizations as well as local government for programs that serve Martin County children and families. We do not fund for-profit organizations, programs that operate under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Martin County School District, or programs that require worship or religion as a requirement for program participation. Applicants may propose a new program not currently funded by CSC or a continuation of an existing CSC funded program, either with or without revisions. And when you submit your application for those currently funded, assume we do not know your program. In addition to the staff reviewing the applications, we have a community advisory panel. Many of the panel members will not be familiar with your program, so we always stress the importance of assuming we don't know your program and write it as if you were, write your application as if we knew nothing about your program. This is a competitive process. So for programs that are currently funded, funding is not guaranteed. So this is zero-based funding. If you are currently within this priority area, again, this is competitive. Next slide, please. Yep. Proposals are evaluated based on these core funding parameters. CSC prioritizes programs that are evidence-based, research-informed, or research-proven, and demonstrate measurable outcomes. Your program application should show positive impact and replicable outcomes using validated tools. And we are going to go into that in more detail later on when Chanda begins her portion of the presentation. Our funding decisions are informed by national, state, and local data, the prevalence of issues in Martin County, and also with qualitative data. In addition to the RFP, you'll find attached to the RFP three surveys that were administered over the last several months to support the RFP, so that I encourage everyone to review those surveys and to look at what the qualitative data shows. The proposal must also align with our 2631 strategic plan, and that includes the 2 priority areas, as well as the leading indicators or subcategories that we'll walk through in a minute, and the investment strategies that are outlined in the strategic plan. We strongly encourage programs to collaborate and to demonstrate collective impact models, and we are looking for programs that show partnerships and the establishment of a system of care. A strong proposal will clearly show evidence of need. It will be in alignment with the strategic plan and demonstrate collaboration. Next slide, please. And before applying, it is critical that applicants understand the contractual and policy expectations of the RFP, and to review the program and funding policies, our chart of accounts, and our sample contract and budget. We will also require that your executive director or equivalent must certify the information so that it is true and accurate. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, upon submission of the deadline date and time, no further application information will be accepted. Within the application, you'll find several resources, including our program and funding policies, chart of accounts, and sample contract and budget labeled resources. We encourage you all to read these before going through, before submitting, because if you need to submit a contract and policy compliance waiver, you're required to do so with your application. We won't accept that after the fact. And the insurance requirements, we also ask you to read closely. We've included a redline version of our policy document in the application. For those of you that are currently funded, it will show the changes from what we have this year in place to what's expected next year. So please review those, because there may be some new requirements. But essentially, certificates of insurance must include a 30-day notice for material changes, a 10-day notice for non-payment cancellation, and CSC must be listed as additional insured and on a primary and non-contributory basis. We may determine that, depending on the program that you're proposing, we may ask for additional insurance coverage, and the insurance coverage may vary slightly for government versus non-government agencies, but all must comply with policy 5.6. Failure to meet insurance requirements can delay or prevent the contract execution. If recommended for funding, you must have your insurance policy in place prior to contract execution. So again, just before moving forward in the application, we strongly encourage you to review all policies and contractual requirements, and if you cannot meet them, to submit a waiver at that time. Waivers are not guaranteed, but we must know if there's something that you cannot meet prior to or in conjunction with the submission of your application. this point, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Okay, good morning, everyone. As you know, we are accepting proposals under 2 priority areas for 26-27. That first priority area is for strong, nurturing families, and the second is safe, stable communities. But we're going to be going through quickly these leading indicators for strong, nurturing families, which is child maltreatment and parent-guardian engagement, as well as children living in economic hardship and poverty. We want to draw attention that these investments are grounded in prevention, early intervention, and some interventions strengthening protective factors for families. Applicants can apply under each priority area, but programs must align to at least one leading indicator or subcategory. But your design should clearly connect to these investment strategies. Also, please note that should you apply for more than one subcategory under each priority area, they should be separate applications that are submitted. Also, if you have a collaboration with the Martin County School District, please note that we would need a letter of support or collaborative agreement that must be uploaded in the collaborative agreement section of this application that Kara will go over later in the presentation. If the proposed program is recommended for funding by CSE, signed agreements between the school district and the applicant must be in place prior to contract execution. Next slide, please. And then to go over investments in our strong nurturing families priority area, we want to point out first that we're looking for connection to resources and systems navigation. So we are prioritizing programs that reduce fragmentation in the system. Think no wrong door. Families can easily access services and be connected across providers. We're looking for strong examples to include coordinated intake, case management, and referral systems. Secondly, we're looking for family resilience and protective factors. We're looking for programs that actively build protective factors, not just provide services. We're looking that these programs are strengthening parenting skills, social connections, and caregiver confidence. Evidence-based parenting programs and family strengthening models are key under this specific subcategory. Thirdly, we're looking at economic stability and self-sufficiency. Programs should go beyond crisis support and move families towards long-term stability and mobility. We are especially interested in coaching models, goal-based planning, and individualized strategies. So be thinking, how does this family exit your program stronger and more stable? Strong proposals will show clear movement from need to intervention to measurable family level change. Next slide, please. We're also accepting proposals under our priority area, safe, stable communities with leading indicators, intimate partner and violence, family violence, juvenile justice involvement, out of school suspension, unintentional injury and death. So again, applicants must align to at least one of the 4 leading indicators, as just mentioned. These indicators are driven by local and national data trends. This is where we see risk to children and families. And those sections are highlighted in the RFP, so please pay attention. Child maltreatment impacts brain development and long-term outcomes. Juvenile justice trends and need for diversion. Suspension impacts academic and life trajectories. And we're also seeing injury, death prevention priorities as it's related to drowning, sleep safety, and traffic. Next slide, please. Now, these investments specific to strategies are what we're looking to fund. The first investment has to do with youth engagement and school community connection. We are prioritizing programs that increase connection and not just reduce problems. We're focusing on social-emotional skills, communication, and conflict resolution. And we're looking for strong programs to prevent issues before they escalate. So we're looking at preventative education and skill building primarily in this investment. For the second investment for juvenile justice diversion and prevention, we're looking for evidence-based diversion strategies that reduce system involvement. Programs should demonstrate how they interrupt pathways into justice involvement. The research supports diversion plus restorative approaches over punitive systems. Thirdly, we're looking at reducing suspensions and increasing school engagement. Programs should address the root causes of behavior, not just consequences. We're looking for trauma-informed approaches and restorative practices, which are strongly encouraged. Suspension linked to disengagement and justice involvement risk. The fourth and last investment is injury and death prevention. We are prioritizing high impact, preventable risk areas such as water safety and drowning prevention, safe sleep education, motor vehicle safety. We're looking for programs that should include education plus behavior change strategies. And above all, strong proposals will show how prevention strategies translate into measurable reductions in risk. I believe the next slide is Chanda. Does anybody have any questions before we move on?
None so far.
Okay, good morning. This is Chanda Narkowitz. It's good to be with you this morning. I'm going to first talk about this classification system that we use for program interventions and curricula that you may be proposing in your applications. And this helps us classify the interventions in curricula to help us represent the strength of your proposed program's impact and how best to measure it. So starting with research-based or informed interventions and curricula. I prefer the term research-informed because the definition of a research-based intervention and or curricula is that the research informs and influences the specific intervention or curricula that you're using. A research-based or informed intervention or curricula is based upon the most current available research or practice and policies in a specific area. However, the exact use of the research that contributes to the intervention or curriculum has not been evaluated for a specific intended outcome. So typically those products do not have an accompanying method of measuring effect, though the research or practice associated with it can be very substantial and have been accumulating for quite some time. The area of evidence-based interventions or curricula is, I'll spend a little bit more time on this because this is where we have the greatest amount of performance measures developed if a program is funded, and that's based on evidence-based interventions or curricula. We do not typically refer to programs as evidence-based, but we refer to their interventions and or curricula that have been shown to be evidence-based. So to be an evidence-based intervention or curricula, it meets two criteria at minimum. Number one, it must be independently outcome evaluated. So separate from the author or the developer, an independent party has been engaged in the process of conducting an outcome evaluation. And that outcome evaluation is dependent upon what has been deemed the contract to look at. And so that's why we refer to evidence-based products as having a very wide range of effect, a very wide range of strength that's been shown, and at some level or degree, because there's a wide range of determinations of evidence basing. So, for example, some subject matter curricula tend to be the ones that have the less strength or the less that you can say about the product, because there's a pre-test, subject matter is introduced, and then a post-test. However, some evidence-based, I'll use curricula again as an example, have much more specific criteria to follow in terms of exposure to the concepts to be learned. For example, there might be a defined order of presenting material, and in addition to presenting the material, there might be activities that are included to be provided to the participant population with specificity so that concepts are practiced in order to reinforce the possibility of learning. Also, some evidence-based curricula have criteria regarding the number of sessions to be provided within a specified set length of time, sometimes with no more than X days in between sessions, because it's been designed to present the information and consolidate it within a certain time frame, again, to support learning. Some evidence-based curricula are also strengthened or stronger because they're continuously updated and continuously outcome evaluated to determine effect, and this increases the ability to say more about the intended effect or outcome. We worked with one curriculum, for example, that had 2 post-tests. So there was a pre-test, post-test, and post-test, the second after a specified time after the curriculum was completed, to determine whether the retention of materials could be proven, or not proven, but evaluated for effect. So we do ask that you look into any evidence-based interventions and or curricula that are being proposed to determine how each was evidence-based. If it's an evidence-based curriculum, you can usually go to the page where you buy it, or you can pull it, and there's often a tab that says research or evaluation. And oftentimes it will say in there very specifically what was outcome evaluated. And again, the outcome evaluation can be just any increase on the post side. Does not have to be statistically significant, but just any positive gain. And there might be an actual report in there, the actual outcome evaluation report that you can pull down. If that's available, please include that in your application, or include in your narrative what the outcome evaluation tab says as the effect of the curriculum. I often contact the representatives of curricula and also the representatives of interventions to obtain additional information to see if there's anything more that can be stated about the effect of the intervention or curricula. In one example, I called a curricula that said that the outcome was the average of all the post scores was 5 points higher than the average of the pre-scores. And I called to say, is there anything else that can be said? And their response was, no, that's what they were, engaged or contracted to show. And so the 5 points higher of the average of the post scores versus the average of the pre-scores qualifies it as an evidence-based product. With that, you may not be able to say as much as you can about the effect because it doesn't allow you to say anything about sufficiency or proficiency. In other words, they weren't asked to look at whether there were a certain number of sessions that increase the learning effect, or any type of minimum post score that should be achieved, so that you can infer that enough information has been absorbed to say that there was learning. So in summary, what we ask is that you follow any and all criteria of an evidence-based product so that it increases the chances of replicating that same effect per the outcome evaluation. I advise that you don't assign a higher level of effect other than what was outcome evaluated. So if it says 5 points higher average post versus average pre, I would suggest you offer that as the way to measure it, because if nothing else was outcome evaluated, you wouldn't know if you're offering a stronger effect, whether that can be achieved or not. Also, we ask that you consider in choosing your interventions or curricula for your proposed program, whether the setting or the amount of contact time you have with each participant for any one session or over time can accommodate any instructions or criteria that come with an intervention and or a curricula. So if it says we want you to do this in 3 sessions with the 4th session to offer the post-test, and you only have access to the participant populations twice, that may not be a good fit for your proposed program. And in terms of evidence-based interventions, often the literature, you can find in the literature the use of the interventions and how it was evaluated, so that you can provide that in the application. So the last one is a very intense process, research proven per hypotheses. Again, I do not refer to a program as research proven, but that there are hypotheses that have proven certain effect at a specified level of confidence. And these are, when you have research proven hypotheses, we all know, if you remember your courses from college, a problem is identified, relevant data is gathered, a hypothesis is formulated. The hypothesis is empirically tested via quasi-experimental or experimental design and may be supported at a specified level of confidence. These are rigorous study methods that get as close to a known fact as science can prove. And that was a quote from a very wonderful mentor researcher. I do think that sometimes evidence-based products are thought of as research proven, but they're very distinct methodologies, one in outcome evaluation and one in empirically tested or through quasi-experimental or experimental design, which is very, very rigorous. And then, of course, we would ask that you insert or upload any research information, outcome evaluation, or research reference to support the classification of each of the interventions or curricula that you are proposing in your programs. Any questions about this slide? I have a couple of more, but is there anything on this one? Okay.
So far.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we have measurement tools and methodology. And in the application, there's going to be a question that asks you to respond in a narrative form for each measurement method to be used and indicate what type of measurement methodology or instrument you are proposing to put into effect. And this is just one, a list of different types. It could be a pre or post test associated with a curriculum that is evidence-based, a validated instrument, a norm referenced or standardized assessment, a post-only or pre-post test or measurement. I want to focus on that for a minute. Oftentimes we get submittals for pre and post, but also some measurements are fine if they suggest a post-only. And so the post-only would suggest that you're looking for sufficiency of whatever the gain is on the post side, and that shows the gain. So it might be that if you have a score of 70 out of a possible 80, then that's determined, hopefully through some outcome evaluation, that shows sufficient effect. It also can be a measure, an indicator of progress supported by industry standards. So at times we have proposals where there isn't a measurement instrument to be uploaded or a survey or specific test, but the nature of the industry is such that there's a process to go through to show an indicator of change or progress or sufficiency, and that's absolutely fine. And what you can do is type that up or include that in the narrative of your application. And if you're including that as one of your performance measures that we'll talk about in the next slide, then the space where you upload your instrument, you can upload a Word product that goes into more detail about how you determine that progress and what protocol you use. Also, it doesn't always have to be a score. It can be a significant achievement on the post side that's linked in research to a proposed intervention. So I usually use examples that are outside of the funding priority areas that are up for application. So in this instance, it could be the significant achievement is that a student achieved high school graduation, and then you indicate by that the percentage that you hope to have achieved that result or outcome in your proposal. So it's not always a score. A test or survey that's developed by the applicant organization is typically not preferred. I guess another way to refer to that is homegrown. I've looked this up and researched this, and there are times, but it is rare, where there's just nothing available to represent the outcome that you're trying to show has occurred. So we do not prefer that, but at times it's possible. I haven't come across it very often, but it's a possibility, I assume. So what we ask in that section of the application is you provide a brief description of each measurement instrument or methodology, including the target population, what is intended to be measured and how, its test administration protocol, scoring methodology, and the change or effect indicators. And also to insert URLs or upload the measurement instruments, as I mentioned earlier, a methodology with pertinent information or research. One last point on this is oftentimes we'll have applications that indicate that a measurement methodology or instrument meets the standards of 4 or 5 of these in the list. And that's not typical. It's most of the time they're discrete. For example, an evidence-based curricula that's been outcome evaluated is not the same as a validated instrument, and certainly not as rigorous as having standardized assessment that's been norm referenced. So when you indicate for us what type of measurement method you're using, look up the information surrounding that. It will tell you what it is. And it's okay if it's one thing. A validated instrument is just fine. Okay. This is a packed slide. So when you are in the application, there will be a series of questions that will generate what we call an evaluation table. And it will ask you question by question what to provide for us that will generate what we call a performance measure if we contract with you. And so they're typically generated when per each significant or primary intervention and or curriculum that's being proposed with the program, and only for those that have individual data entry populations. So if you're doing a group and you're not collecting information on each individual in that group, then that could be indicated elsewhere in the application, but not within this table that generates your evaluation and performance measures. I want to speak to the first one a little bit, primary outcome, and suggest or make a recommendation that it's okay when you fill that out for one outcome, let's say it's related to a certain intervention, keep that specific to that intervention or curriculum. Oftentimes, the response to that as your primary income
Oh,
will
sorry.
will be similar to the vision or the mission of your program that you indicate at the beginning of the application. So it's okay to, if you're working in literacy, for example, and your goal is to have all children reach a level of literacy in their, by the time they're an adult, that wouldn't be the outcome or the primary outcome if you're breaking down a performance measure related to a certain curriculum or intervention. It's okay to say in that space that your outcome in that space is children's oral fluency skills will increase. We know what your ultimate goal is. So be specific with that so that when we read that, we know what you're saying very clearly, what the outcome, the intended outcome will be for each included intervention or curriculum. And of course, the rest is the typical, the projected length of participation or number of episodes or sessions that they'll be exposed to the intervention or curriculum. And also if this proposed PM is continued, if you're with us now and you're applying for this to be considered for renewal, or if the PM is revised or new, and be as clear as you can about any revisions so I can look at the current PM and know exactly how you're changing it. Indicate the intended participant population. Is it a child of a certain age or in a certain grade? Is it a community member? Is it a parent, etc.? And the total number of participants, child and or adult. Typically, if you have one participant population for the child and the adult is receiving a companion intervention, it would be two different PMs if you're collecting individual data. The target number 1 and the target number 2 are pretty important because that's where we ask for specific information that forms your performance measure. So for target number 1, it's of the total participants, the percentage that is expected to achieve the desired effect. So how many of all the youth participants that you're working with will have, reached a high school graduation at the end of your intervention. And the second part, the specific projected effect after the curricular intervention is completed, is asked for in this series of questions that you'll be asked to complete. Meaningful, and that can be as below, meaningful improvement, and it occurs, as I said, at the individual level, and it's the expected result of the intervention or curriculum upon completion. Again, it may not be a score or a difference in the score. It can be meeting a rate of sufficiency or proficiency, the acquirement of a specific skill at a specific level. As I mentioned before, an achievement of a critical benchmark or the avoidance of a negative consequence. So it would be that you're going to show that that child avoided arrest or rearrest. I usually advise, if you can, if you have any questions about a measurement instrument, a survey, I tend to call and contact the researchers, lead investigators, the developers. They've never turned me down yet, and they usually have quite a lot of insight. And sometimes they've improved or changed the survey and can say certain things about it that's advanced beyond the research article that you might have. So if you want to do that, I think that adds to your application. And also, yes, avoid any increase unless specifically directed by measurement instrument guidelines. So follow again with this. If there's research that supports the result, please include that in your application so we can look at that and understand that you're saying, for example, 78% of completing participants will have desired effect XYZ. And so anything you can do to substantiate that performance measure is really helpful. So what I'd like you to do is think of your proposed program as an investment in a continuum of care designed to, in this application, to meet families and their children at different levels of need. And specific to family strengthening, you might be proposing programs at different levels of need in the populations that you want to serve the children and their families. And that level of intervention or need of the population you're serving then drives the services that you're proposing, the measures you're proposing, and how to measure them, and with what intensity or level or of intervention or strength. So, for example, universal programs in the space of family strengthening would potentially be intended for broad populations of parents and caregivers focused on perhaps general parenting education, skill building, while strengthening protective factors before challenges emerge. And that might be a place where research-based interventions are appropriate. More programs that are called more selective programs in the range above universal ones are often designed for families with identified risk factors or elevated needs. So there's been something that's already been depicted as an issue, and the proposed program could potentially provide more targeted supports to prevent the challenges from deepening, worsening, while also strengthening family functioning. And indicated programs are for those that would be beyond prevention and early intervention, but more within the intervention stage for families experiencing significant or ongoing challenges, and with the need to have more intensive and individualized interventions to address very specific behavioral and relational concerns. So any questions? That's my last slide. Any questions about what I've said so far? Okay, I encourage any questions when you're in the application. You'll see ask a question, and that will, Kara can explain a little bit more about that. But I love questions, and as long as I can reach out and answer them, and we have the potential to publish certain answers to all applicants if it seems like that's a question that would benefit everybody. I know this can be very complicated, so please reach out. Don't suffer. Let us know if you need some feedback in these areas, and I'll help as much as I can. Thank you so much, and good luck.
We did have a question submitted.
Okay.
Can we submit an RFP for a new program under the same priority area as our currently existing partnership for a different program?
You want to answer that, Kara, since you're the director of ops?
Sure. So Brandon, repeat the question for me, please.
Can we submit an RFP for a new program under the same priority area as our currently existing partnership for a different program?
Yes. Yes, you may.
Sounds
That is a very straightforward answer, short and sweet.
right.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon. All right. So moving on, I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of things. This is my opportunity to bring up that there's probably, there may be several people working on one application for funding. And so from your organization. And so it's a good idea for you to be acquainted with all the different aspects of the application. I noticed there's already some applications that have been started. So yay you, if you're one of those organizations that have already started an application. It's a great idea to do that right away, even if you have no intention of working on the application immediately, so you know what's being asked of you. So one of the things, for example, that's a great illustration of how there might be several different people from your organization working on the application is that the support docs within itself that are being asked of you within the application include several different things, including a list of your current board of directors, your IRS 990, audited financial statements, the budget for your organization, an org chart. So I can see maybe HR might be a part of this, or other aspects of your organization. So the same person who might be writing the meat of the proposal in terms of what's happening programmatically being proposed may be a different person than who might be gathering all of the job descriptions that need to be uploaded that's associated with the proposed program. There's a note on this slide that references making sure that you match the job titles listed in the budget workbook to the job descriptions that are being uploaded. So then whoever your fiscal person is wants to make sure that they're using the correct job titles that are associated with the job descriptions that will be uploaded as a support document, as an example. And as a quick note, we anticipate that there may be some proposals that are anticipating having subcontract agreements in place. We do not ask for those subcontract agreements to be uploaded with the application, but reference to them should be listed. And then if we do recommend funding for a proposed program, those subcontract agreements would need to be submitted to CSC prior to contract execution. So another portion of the application, this is something that Laura referenced at the beginning of our proposers conference, talking about the need to submit the actual request for a policy or contract waiver. So we want you to make sure to remind you that you are reviewing all of our program and funding policies and the sample contract so that you know whether or not you will be able to comply with all CSE policies and contract requirements, and then you would not need a waiver letter. If, however, you do need a waiver letter, then there are several different options for you to select within the application and a space to upload your requested letter. So just remembering that that's a really important piece. So this, you'll see that whenever there is an asterisk next to a field, that means it's a required response before you can move forward in the application. If it does not have an asterisk, that means it's voluntary, meaning that it's not a mandatory field. So if you do decide that you need to request a waiver, then you would use this field to upload the letter of request right here. And I am going to show you the application, switch over and show you from our site, but I just want to show you a couple of things in the meantime so that you understand how to go about this. So when it comes to accessing the online application, for those of you who are currently funded and already users within the Hub, Martin, or what we used to call SAMUS, there is a module called Open Grants that you can click on to access your application very easily. Those of you who are not, can go to our website, and under funding information, you'll see the link to the application there. And if you've never used our system before, it will prompt you as a new user to create a username and password. The username will be your email address. And so from there, if you are brand new and you do not see your agency listed as an agency that we have funded, then you would click agency not listed, enter in your SunBiz, your EIN number and your information, and then that should validate you to be able to move forward. That brings up a good topic if there is any technical issues where you're having a hard time accessing the application, or there's something that's acting glitchy within the application. Please remember that you can submit an email to program support at cscmc.org in order to ask any questions. That email is listed in the RFP document, so you don't have to write it down here. It is something that is easily accessible within the RFP for you to reference in the event that you're having any technical issues. So that email goes to several of us here at CSE so we can all help you problem solve or troubleshoot as needed. So if, for example, you put in your EIN number and it doesn't validate, but you know it's the right number, we can do some manual things on the back end to help you move forward. So just let us know if you're having any issues. Then this is a great opportunity for me to remind you that the title of your application should be your organization's name and your program's name. So please don't get creative and do something different. Only use your organization's legal name and the program's name as the title of your application. You have the opportunity right up front to add authorized users, but if you don't want to do that right away, there's another opportunity for you to do it elsewhere. You can name anybody that you want because there is the opportunity for several different people to utilize the application at the same time. So you could be working on one section of the application while your finance person is working on the fiscal side of things, or several different people could be accessing the application at the same time. We'll speak more about that in a moment. And there are some pre-application questions that you'll need to answer. This goes into our funding parameters and who we can fund. So this has to be answered correctly before you can move forward. This is a good opportunity for us to pause for any questions that you might have, as I'm going to switch over to the live version so I can show you the application.
Actually was a quick question here. If you, the applicant, are no longer funded but have a SAMIS username and password, would the user have access to the SAMIS portal?
Should. Laura, can you handle that?
Yeah, I think the user should, but if there's an issue, just let us know because there's a possibility that we had turned them off, but we can turn them back on. So you can reach out to us if you have any issues, but I do believe it should happen, work. So there's also a couple of budget questions. Have we answered those? Jen, have you reviewed those, or Zach? Brandon, I think you've been answering them, so I think we're clear. I don't know if there were any additional questions regarding the workbook.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, can everybody see Testy's welcome page in the hub?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I am impersonating a test person named Testy McTesterson, who has already started an application. So I just want to show you from the perspective of an applicant what you might see. This is someone who would be already funded, so has access to other modules within. Those of you who don't have already have access within the system, you would probably only see the open grants, my profile, and application section. So when you go, so this is a great opportunity for me to remind you that though this system is supposed to be browser neutral, it is best to use Chrome and to make sure that Chrome is the most updated version that you are using. That will prevent anything glitchy from happening. Oftentimes when there are people having some issues around the application being a bit glitchy, is that my first question is usually, can you switch over to Chrome if you're not already using that? So good idea to start using Chrome and use Chrome all the way through. So the Open Grants module is a great module for you to click on because it's going to show you the solicitation itself. Good reminder here that a recording of today's proposers conference will be available on our website for any team members that were not available to join us this morning. When you click on the blue button down here that says view details or apply, that's going to bring you to this main section that's really important for you to remember. So if you have a question that you want to ask, the ask a question function is here. You can also download a PDF of the application if you want to. And this is the place where you start a new application. Once you've started a new application, it will live here under My Applications. And then there's another place to ask a question. Same function, just a different place to access it right here. So you'll see that the timeline is listed, which is when the application opened, our question deadline, which is a little earlier for those of you who are familiar with our application process. It is a day before the application is due. So making sure that the ask a question function, you know that it's only available through 5 o'clock the day before the application is due. The application is due no later than May 1st at 5 p.m. And then, as Laura mentioned, the recommendations for funding will be voted on by council at our August regular meeting on August 24th. So from here, I'm going to show you that you can click right here to see an application that's already been begun in your name. And that should help you to see that also you can add your authorized users from this page. So when you click manage, it gives you the option to add email addresses for anybody that you want to give access to for this application. You can also go in and manage this afterwards if you want to give access to the application once it's been submitted to someone else to be able to see. So that is important for you to note. So this is where the application main page looks. You'll click this modify button with the pencil in order to make changes within the application. So I've already come in here and added some things and clicked things off. The idea is that each one of these sections will be green with a little check mark on it before you're done. So in order for you to submit the application, all of these sections need to have a green check mark. At this point, obviously, it's not ready to submit, but once all of those are checked off, there will be a submit button that kind of blinks at you that reminds you it's time to submit the application. That is a critical step. Don't forget, even though all of these are green and checked off, you do have to make that step of submitting the application by the deadline. So, good idea to do it before 5 o'clock. Don't push it to the edge if you're having technical difficulties or Wi-Fi connectivity. It's not the old days anymore where you have to worry about a train on your way to the office to drop off your applications, but you do still have to worry about the other things that have to do with technology and connectivity. So clicking modify will bring you into the application. And I just want to go through a couple of the things that you need to know as it relates to navigating around the application. So anytime you make changes and you want to make sure you're saving, of course, the save and continue later button will save it and bring you back to the main page, but you can just click next. That also saves. So any changes that you make to this section will be saved if you press the next button and brings you to the next section in order. You can also bounce around and click anywhere you want in this section to navigate around to different sections as you want to, rather than having to click next to get to the section you want. You can just go over here to the right side where it has your progress and be able to click into any of the sections that you'd need. Let's see. If you make any entry issues, so for example, in the application information section, I've already had it entered in some names here. If you decide, oh, I do know the name of the program director, I don't need to put TBD here. You can just click anywhere on that row and you will be able to open up what you've entered and make any changes that you'd like to make. So if you want to add information or change information that had previously been entered, you can do that just by clicking on the row. It'll open it back up and give you the option to make changes. So we already talked a little bit about mandatory fields. So any field that has an asterisk is absolutely required. This section talks about whether or not you're currently funded for this program that you're proposing. If you're currently funded, please put that amount here and then what your total request would be here. If you're not currently funded, you're just going to put in 0 and what your request is. There is this field here that asks for a kind of a high level overview of any increased funding request and what that might cover. And so if you're not already funded and you're requesting funds from us for the first time, or newly asking for funds for a proposed program, you can just put not applicable here because you won't be able to leave it blank without there being an error when you try to move forward. So if I were to just demonstrate that for you really quick, again, this is a mandatory field. When you try to click this button that says mark this section completed and click next, it's going to say, nope, you didn't capture your response for that item for their increased request overview. So that is going to be a stumbling block. It's a nice little fail safe to remind you that you can't check this box to say the section's been completed if all the fields that are mandatory within that section haven't been filled out. So let's see, wanted to bring your attention to the program section because this has some information above with this little reminder to read more. Please make sure that you're clicking this button to expand because it's here for your benefit to be able to give you some reminders about what our subcategories are. So for example, this question's asking you to specify which funding priority area the proposed program fits within, since there are 2 in this RFP, and which leading indicator / subcategory the proposed program will address. And those are listed here for safe, stable communities and here for strong, nurturing families. So it's meant to be helpful to you along the way. And then another section. It's another table. If you wanted to make changes, as a reminder, you can click into it. It'll open it up for you to see. I also want to show you from this that there's these little eyes. They're meant to be hints for you. If you hover over them, it'll show you what is meant by current contracted. So when you're going to fill this out, if you are going, what the heck is Kara talking about in this application? You can hover over the eye and it'll say, for example, for under current contracted, this field is referencing if you're currently funded by CSC, what is your currently contracted minimum service level? So for your current year, if you're funded already, you would put that minimum service level here and then enter the number of participants served since October 1st. So it's sort of like your mid-year numbers. How are you doing towards that minimum service level? And then lastly is what your number is that you're proposing for the next funding year within this proposed application. So hopefully you'll find these little eyes helpful along the way to give you some hints to be able to accurately fill out this section. So again, once you click that, you'll see that I click next, and then this becomes green with the green check mark. So another section to illustrate, oh, let me go back to program, sorry, is that there is some built-in items within each of these fields. So you'll notice that there are all kinds of formatting options that you can utilize or not within your responses. There are some really great functions as it relates to grammar and spell check. So you'll see as I hover over here that it does have some suggestions on how I might be able to change. So it's kind of nice to have this built-in grammar and spell check functioning, but I wouldn't lean on it completely because it's not perfect. So it will, say, hey, I don't think that you meant to say not. You probably meant to say note. And these are all nice little additional functions. You can use bullets, you can change your font size, your font color, et cetera, et cetera. You can insert tables, all things that are handy moving forward. So you can certainly click the next button and not check this box in terms of navigation functions. It'll just be a good reminder for you to come back and finish those sections later. So you see it didn't turn green, no check mark. So one of the big things that you'll notice that's very different about this application than past applications, if you've had experience applying with us in the last several years, is we used to have a section for other funders, for a staffing table, and a budget table. And though there are some questions around funding for labeled the diversification section, where you'll probably want someone from your fiscal side to weigh in on these responses, there is a very different situation as it relates to the budget, staffing, and other funders tables. So what you'll see instead is when I showed you the other grants, the open grants section of the application, which I'll go back to now, you can click on our logo to go back to the welcome page easily. But from the open grant section, you're going to see those resources. So we'll have the actual RFP that's also available on our website that you can download here from your resources section, the strategic plan, the program and funding policies. As a reminder, these are red lines so that those of you who are funded now can see what's different from the current year. The chart of accounts, our sample contract, and then there's also a sample budget workbook, which should be helpful to guide you as from what we are expecting of you moving forward. And Zach's going to walk through that, but you're also going to want to download right away this budget workbook for the application, because that's what you're going to be uploading into your application once you've gone through the entire workbook and saved it. And Zach, again, will go through that, and you're going to upload it in the budget workbook area right here. Okay, so I'm going to let Zach move on into his portion to go over what the workbook looks like and what you need to know moving forward. And if there's any questions, this would be a great time for us to address them.
Were there any questions? Okay.
Certainly.
All right, so this is our new workbook as it relates for our budget. As Kara said, this is a new process this year. We are not inputting it into SAMUS. This is just going to be all done through Excel. This workbook consists of 29 different worksheets. And this is what we're going to be using to evaluate your program. So I'll kind of scroll through these tabs real quick. The first sheet is the workbook instructions. Then you have your salary and fringe instructions. You have your program information. You have a budget summary tab in which you cannot click, you cannot input anything onto this tab. Everything talks to this worksheet. You have an other funders tab, salary and fringe, administrative costs, advertising, and we have pretty much every GL line item you can think of has its own worksheet attached to it. So for each item, you're going to input that information on each worksheet, and then it's going to talk to the budget summary tab. And I'll get to that in just a second. So first, I'm going to start with the workbook instructions. I know it's tempting to skip it, but if you start here, I think it's going to answer a lot of your questions. One of the most important things to point out is this box in red. Keep in mind, this is for Martin County program expenses only, unless it asks for agency-wide totals. If your program operates in multiple counties or service areas, include only the cost attributable that serves Martin County residents. Okay, moving to the program information tab. This must tie to what's in your application. So if you're requesting $100,000 in your application, you're going to input the $100,000 into the total CSCM request, right? Easy enough. Also put your agency name, as Kara said, make sure it's your legal name and the program name. Once you put that information in here, it's going to talk to the budget summary tab and input that information in. So on the budget summary tab, this is kind of, like I said, everything rolls up to this page, right? At the end of the day, what you're looking for is for this box to be green and say ready to upload. But once I put in your program information, once you key in how much you're asking for from CSC, we'll just say $100,000 in this example. Once I now go to the budget summary tab, it's not in balance, meaning you have not asked CSC for any requests for that $100,000. So that's where each one of these individual tabs is going to come into play. Okay. And one thing to note, once you key in that amount, that $100,000 in this example, when you go to your administrative costs, it's going to tell you how much you can ask for as it relates to a maximum amount for those administrative services. So in this example, it's 10% of your direct services. So in this example, it's $9,091. You don't have to ask for the total amount, but you cannot exceed that amount. If you exceed that $9,000 amount, you're going to get another error message saying not okay to submit. All right, so let's kind of do a quick example to show you how to get this budget in balance. Okay, so if I were to go just as an example, just high level, if I were to say advertising, throughout the year, I'm going to advertise for 2 positions, and it's an average cost of $500 each time. I'm going to ask CSC for that full amount. Keep in mind, you can only click in and you can only input the boxes in white. You cannot, everything in blue, you can't even click on it. It's all formula based. Once you key in that amount, what we also want is an explanation down here below. So in my explanation, we're going to hire 2 social workers this year. Job description have been uploaded for these positions. The average cost for these ads is about $500. And these service workers are going to work for and spend 100% of their time working in Martin County with Martin County residents. So that being said, you can ask for the full amount, the full $1,000. Now let's see how that flows back to the program information. I'm sorry, to the budget summary tab. Right now, we have so far an ask of $1,000. We're still not in balance, right? This is still showing red. So why is it showing red? Because originally we asked for $100,000, and right now we've only requested $1,000 from CSC. So let's make this budget balance. Let's go to the next step, next tab, audit services, right? So most of you guys need an audit. The total agency cost in this example is going to be $100,000 just so we can get this budget to balance. And they're going to say 90% of it. And we're going to ask CSC for $90,000 of that audit, right? And keep in mind, we broke out and showed how we were going to explain. This represents 50% of our budget, 50% of our staff. In that case, this should be actually 180. Whoops, I just leave it at 90 for now. Okay, so now we have that $100,000. And when I go to my budget summary tab, 91,000, I should be 99, my fault. So back to the audit, 99. Sorry, 99%. And now requested from CSC is 99,000. And we go back to that. Why am I not in balance now? 100. Oh, because I need other funding sources. So what that means right now my total request from CSC is $100,000, and that matches. But now I have an error saying that my other funding sources, I must have an additional $1,000 from them in order to make this budget balance. So that's where this other funding sources comes into play. So we'll type in an example of who else is going to help, fund these. We'll say this is just contributions, and it's $1,000. So once I key that in, now my budget's going to go back to imbalance, and it's going to be ready for upload. So keep in mind, this year, as it relates to this, your CSC MC request of the $100,000 must match what's on this line item, and anything exceeding that $100,000 must match your other revenue sources, meaning you must find other sources and to bring those additional funds to the table to be in balance. One last thing I want to share is like Kara was saying, in SAMIS, you're going to see a model budget. I'd like to kind of open that up real quick. So if you bear with me for 1 second, we'll see if I can share that screen. Did my screen change, Kara? Can you see my new screen? Okay, I did. Okay. So this is, once again, this is the same workbook. This is in your, you can use as a tutorial or use as a crutch, but this is a budget that kind of outlines all of the information. So in this example, they're requesting $187,000 from us. It ties to the budget tab. We have other funders and an amount of $165,000. So totaling here is $165,000. You get the okay response. Salary and fringe, there's 4 positions in this example that kind of shows what we're looking for. Let me kind of scroll to the left so you can see how long this is. So here you're going to start with the annual salary. That's the one thing that's different on this one. As in the front, remember, this is annual now. This is not CSCMC only. This is that one example where we're asking for the total salary for that individual. But you are going to key in the percentage on how much time they're working in this program serving Martin County kids. So that's an important note to point out. Going back to the administrative cost, the next tab, same thing, it's very similar. But keep in mind the maximum amount in this example was $17,076. Moving over to the advertising tab. This is an example for advertising, kind of went through that a little bit. Audit, you can see that we give an example for each one of these requests from CSCMC. Even if you're not going to request, children's services to pay any portion of it, please input that expense as well. We want to see how much it costs for you to run this total program. It's an important note. So even if you don't want anything from CSC, please put the cost that's going to cost the agency for this program for Martin County. And with that, I'll turn it over to any questions, please.
We did have one question.
Sure.
Several granting agencies have restriction on the percentage of the application that is generated or checked using AI. Does CSCMC have any restrictions on the use of AI?
I don't believe we have any restrictions on that, not to my knowledge.
We do not have restrictions, but I caution people to not be very careful when they use it. Be sure to review what's written. We have had responses in the past that didn't completely match the program. So it's not advised to use it for your full application, but we recognize that you can use AI as you write some of your responses.
Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, you have that other question?
Where do we find the document that is being displayed? That's going to be in the resources tab, correct, Kara?
Yes. Kara showed that it's in the SAMHSA part, but great question.
Yes, so you're going to find that in the resources section. In order to navigate to that, you're going to go to the Open Grants tab module on your welcome page to find all of the resources, and it has a big, in all capitals, it says download. So that would be probably the first thing you should do is look at all the resource documents and have them downloaded locally into your computer.
An additional question, I think? Or was that answered?
They're saying that the sample budget workbook on SAMHSA is not filled in. It looks like it's the same as a blank workbook.
Okay, if that happened, I can make sure to go back and upload the correct sample budget workshop sheet after this is over. Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Okay, with no more questions, I'll turn it back over to you, Kara. You're on mute.
Stand by. Okay, I'm back. So just to finish this out, I want to thank everyone for their attention during this proposers conference. I will go back in and make sure that that resource document was uploaded properly and get the right one up there for you as the sample workbook. For just some clarifying things that I want to go through. I did mention that there are several different authorized users that have access to the application and can work within the application at the same time. But I also forgot to mention that if you're working on the same section of the application at the same time as another authorized user, you'll see that person's name pop up on your screen to indicate that there is someone else on that section. I recommend you navigate navigate to a different section than the same one someone else is working on, because saving at the same time can get tricky. So though you can work on the application along with the other authorized users at the same time, please refrain from working in the same section, which again, you'll see if someone's working in the same section as you, because their name will pop up on that screen when you're in the same section as someone else. And just to go through some of the hints and tips that we've put together, we recommend that you read the RFP itself carefully and utilize the reference links. Chanda Narkwitz has worked really hard. This is a bit of her baby on this document, and so the references are there for your benefit. We also want to remind you not to assume that we know your program. So even though you may have been operating for a long time, we may have been funding you for a long time. Please write the application as if we do not know you or your program at all. Leads me to another tip, which is to not take what you wrote in your last application and copy it and paste it from previous years, in the sense that we expect that your program has evolved and changed and developed over the last 5 years. And so from your last application, also noting that our application has shifted and changed a little bit over the years. So please make sure that you're approaching this application with fresh eyes. And certainly, if you are going to be proposing current performance measures moving forward, that you reference that in your performance measurement table. Remembering that the waiver request letters, should they need to be requested, that they must be submitted with the application. So allow time to review those documents within the resources section of the open grants solicitation, so that you know if you're able to comply with the contractual obligations and the program and funding policies. I certainly recommend that you assign a lead staff to oversee all the RFP sections. So what we recommend is that someone is looking at the whole package, because often when people take bits and pieces, it looks like someone has taken bits and pieces of the application. So having one person who can look at the entire document is always a good idea. It's also a good idea to have someone outside of your organization look through, to make sure that someone with fresh eyes and a different perspective makes sure that it makes sense and that they are following what you've written. The due date, again, is May 1st, 5 p.m. Electronic access to the application ends right on the nose. So be sure that you are working ahead of time, and that you are looking at the whole document, whether you intend to work on the application right away or not. Good idea to download that application if you haven't already. Get one started so you know what's being asked of you. So we are really grateful that everyone came to this, and we want you to share the recording with anybody on your team who hasn't had the opportunity to sit in this morning. Laura, do you have any closing words?
I just want to mention that this recording will be available on our website, and can we confirm that that's on our homepage, correct?
It will be, yes.
That will be located on the homepage, and just take an opportunity for any additional questions. If anybody has anything.
Laura, this is Chanda. I have an additional thought to put out there, and that is that we have a strategic plan that is on our website now that associates with the funding cycle for this RFP. And that strategic plan, under the 2 funding priority areas, covers national, state, regional data and information related to the subcategories and the investment statements. The RFP focused a lot on more local and Martin County information, but that might also be a place to go to if you want to kind of see how we have thought out these areas of interest, is the strategic plan on the website.
Yep. And I believe it's also listed as one of the resources on the application site within the hub. So it's located in 2 different places. And other than that, thank you for spending your Monday morning with us. And again, if you do have questions that come up after today, there is the ability to submit those questions through the online application, and we will publish those once we're answered so everybody can benefit from that. Other than that, I think we're good, and we look forward to receiving your proposals.